legs ran frantic like birds from a nest, and I ran until drained, leaving no choice but rest. So I fell asleep softly at the edge of the
Oh, hello, Roanoke. Welcome to T-Bone's Best of Roanoke show, where we go after the best people, places, and things to do in our fair city. Big thanks to our studio band and my special guest host, Mr. G. Woo! Now, on with the show. Oh, if you're connected to comedy in Roanoke, then you've heard of our next guest. He's Johnny Camacho, stand-up comedian and improv artist. Johnny, thanks for hosting us here at Deschutes Tasting Room.
Well, thank you for having me. Absolutely.
There's a lot I want to get into with you. I want to hear your take on all things comedy in Roanoke and the things you've done since you've come back to Roanoke, things you've gotten involved in with comedy. And I want to learn more about you. And then at the end, I want to trade off some good comedy movies or TV shows or artists you might recommend. And we'll give you some of ours.
Absolutely.
So we'll just have we'll be bumping comedians there. So tell us this, you're straight out of Bath County.
Yes.
Where the heck is Bath County?
Bath County, I suppose if you were to get on 220 north from Roanoke and drive an hour and a half into George Washington National Forest, you would be in Bath County. Like it's essentially 4,000 people living in the woods with no stoplights, a thriving comedy scene, as you might imagine.
Yes.
And I can certainly appreciate the beauty and natural wonder of Bath County and the people who were instrumental in my development. But I got out of there just as soon as I could. So I spent after I went to college, I went to Roanoke College, then after that I went to Brooklyn, and I sort of steeped myself in comedy full time up there, and then I left when I realized how stupid the rent was. So that's what brings me here.
The rent,
yes. That you can't beat that quality of life to cost of living ratio here in Roanoke, Virginia.
That balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm fascinated by the Bath County aspect, Johnny. I've got to go back to your roots.
Oh, of course.
I've got to.
Yes.
Now, true or false? Sixth grade, you landed, probably against heavy competition, the lead role in the school play Winnie the Pooh. Is there a story about how that became your first improv?
First of all, I would like to know which Russian intelligence agency you talked to acquire this information.
It's mostly China.
Okay, all right. Yes,
Chinese sources.
That is true. There was a school production of Winnie the Pooh. Apparently, I did really well in the audition, so I got the lead role, the title character.
That would be Winnie.
This iconic, landmark in children's literature and entertainment.
Number one.
And I did not bother to learn any of the lines. Like, it was this 5-week rehearsal period where I could have memorized the script for this thing.
What were you doing, Johnny?
What was I doing
Hanging
instead?
out with Eeyore or what?
I was channeling my inner Eeyore. I was really getting into some heavy psychotherapy.
Well, I guess.
That is. So I didn't learn any of the lines, and I get up on stage, and I realize everyone else knows lines. This isn't some improv pantomime we're doing. Everyone else has their lines down. They're expecting me to be there. And I'm pretty sure the only line I nailed consistently was line. I would look over at the stage manager or the director, and I would say line, and they would have to feed it to me from the wings of the stage. And that was an entire performance. And I had younger kids, these are elementary school kids, 3rd, 4th grade, coming up to me afterwards dude, don't quit your day job. that was one of the hardest professional roastings I've ever received. But
Well, did you have a nice outfit, a nice Winnie the Pooh outfit to go with your...
oh, I did. The lack of preparedness was complemented nicely by the full body Winnie the Pooh costume that was
Full
provided.
body.
Full body. There was a pie tin size opening for my face, and that was it.
So you got off to a very promising start.
Right.
And you were probably contacted by other sixth grades to do their plays.
It's safe to say I got blacklisted in the Allegheny Highlands after that performance. It would be years before I would reclaim any sort of respect or dignity or self-worth.
I see. Well, you could look at it as, I guess, a learning experience.
Of course.
And you took that, you channeled that, and you went to Roanoke College. You got a degree in theater, drama?
That is correct. That is correct. It was, that was one of those high return on investment degrees you read about.
ROI.
Yes, absolutely. I was trying to avoid the acronyms so early in the morning, but I went to Roanoke College, and for a long time I had a very specific, I was a very kind of ambitious and put together teenager. I had this sort of 5-year plan that involved the Air Force and law school and professional politics, that whole thing. And once I sort of learned more about my personality, I realized none of that was going to work. So I went to college and I got cast in a play, and I realized it was a great way for a socially awkward creative type to get dates. So it was really the most classic craven reason for going into the arts. But it's not a new story.
It's not a new story. So from Roanoke College,
yes,
you leapfrogged up to Brooklyn.
Yeah. After Roanoke, I hung out in Salem for a little bit, and then I went to Brooklyn, and I just did comedy for a couple of years. That was my. I sort of think of my time in New York as an extended graduate program period,
right,
where
masters.
I was just up there specifically learning one particular thing. So I didn't do any stage acting up there. I did a lot of stand-up comedy. I did a lot of improv comedy, studied improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and very quickly sort of went from their beginning level up to the Advanced Conservatory, which is an audition-only type program. And against the backdrop of all the comedy that I was performing, I got a job at Caroline's on Broadway,
right,
which is a pretty iconic Times Square comedy club. And the general manager contacted me, wanted to do an interview. And I thought he wanted to talk about a bartending position, maybe he wanted me to wait tables in the club, and he offers me this position as his personal assistant. So I have basically, all of a sudden I find myself in this 9-to-5 office job where my job is booking comedians to perform at this comedy club. After work, I'm going to comedy clubs at night, scouting out new talent. I was just totally invested, not just on the performance side, but on the production and sort of pseudo-management side of comedy as well. So that was eye-opening. That taught me a lot about comedy as a profession and as a daily grind that people choose to devote themselves to economically, rather than just this sort of abstract artistic thing you do in your spare time. Either avenue is fine. You just have to identify what the right one is for you, I guess, as a comedian.
Would you find new talent, or would you call on already experienced comedians that maybe I've heard of? Or?
Right. So there are basically, you can think of Caroline's or any major comedy club in terms of their weekend schedule and their weekday schedule. So the weekday schedule, Mondays and Tuesdays, were typically reserved exclusively for new talent.
Okay.
Or sort of on Tuesday night, we might take an artist who was almost there. Might take a comedian who was starting to get some traction. Maybe they'd done a couple talk shows, and give them an hour on stage. Just sort of their first big headlining thing in New York. Wednesdays and Thursdays were sort of a mixed bag of showcases of more established comedians. The weekends is where you get people like Dick Gregory and Norm Macdonald and Jay Farrow, Michael Che. If there's an A-list guy making the rounds in the country today, Caroline's is probably going to be the crown jewel of their New York stop.
A-list.
A-list, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so I got to meet so many of my heroes. I remember when Bath County got satellite TV. This was a big deal.
That was 2001?
That was last week, and so we when we got satellite TV, I was probably like, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old, and the first channel I turned on was Comedy Central, and Gilbert Gottfried was sort of doing his shtick, that voice of his, and I don't think until I was about 17 I ever turned off of Comedy Central. And so my first day in the office at Caroline's, I'm answering the phone. Caroline's, this is Johnny. How can I help you? And he goes, hey, Johnny, this is Gilbert Gottfried. I'm trying to reach Lewis. And Lewis was my boss. And I'm like, okay, I've officially arrived in La La Land.
Now,
I might run for mayor.
now when he's calling you on the phone, Johnny, is he in that voice or is he in
I hope I'm not giving away a big trade secret here, but when he's just talking on the phone, he doesn't sound anything like Iago from Aladdin. I was a little disappointed, to be honest with you.
Right, that's what you expect.
Yeah. Sort of like the unmasking that I never really wanted to happen. But
Along those lines, let me ask you this. So Caroline's, it has a certain market, but where would the people who maybe live there tend to go? They probably wouldn't go to Caroline's.
Not all the time. You might go to Caroline's if there's like a big headliner show, and because Caroline seats 300 people, so you can see a comedian who might be playing a theater or an arena elsewhere playing for a room of 300 people.
Yeah.
I think that probably, because the thing about the Comedy Cellar is the cover is usually no more than $10. $10 for a tight hour and a half of some of the best comedians in New York City. There's no other $10 show that I can think of anywhere in the country where you might be able on a Monday night to see Dave Attell and Jim Norton and Jeff Ross and Michelle Wolf and Michael Che. But that's a standard night at the Cellar.
Wow.
So I think that probably if you talk to a New Yorker on the street, in terms of like cost to content quality, Comedy Cellar is going to be where most people go most nights. Caroline's is a destination, people travel into New York City with that on their itinerary.
Is there any other place up there besides Comedy Cellar you might recommend that if you were going up to New York City that you'd want to go to where the locals go, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I would say if you're going to New York City looking for comedy, see who's headlining Caroline's, check out the lineups at the Comedy Cellar, and then make a point to go to either of the two Upright Citizens Brigade theaters.
Okay, where are they?
There's one now. When I was up there studying and performing, it was in Chelsea, but the flagship theater has moved to Hell's Kitchen. And then the other one is in the East Village. And so the East Village one used to be like an old Two Boots pizzeria with this movie theater attached. And the Two Boots is still there, but they turned the theater into an improv space. And both of those theaters are 7 nights a week of programming. And the most expensive ticket, I think, is still $12 with no drink minimum. So you can go see some really amazing stuff there for $7 or $12, depending on the night or the show. Wow. The weekend programming there is stellar. They put up their best improv teams. And then on Monday nights, I think it's Mondays, they still do at midnight a free stand-up comedy show. Oh. Like Dave Chappelle's dropped in on it. Yep. Chris Rock has dropped in on it. Aziz Ansari. Like, the show is sort of it's a well-kept secret among really famous comedians. Like, if we're working on some stuff, we want to try it for an audience that's not too invested because it was a free show,
right?
But still respects comedy. Yeah. Then this is the spot to perform. So anything at the Upright Citizens Brigade, you might hear me refer to it in the shorthand as UCB, because that's sort of like the student and the local vernacular is, you talk about UCB shows.
Okay.
Those shows sort of expanded my mind about what comedy can be.
Wow. Okay. So that'd be a place you'd recommend for people coming up from Roanoke, dropping into New York City, wanting to hear some comedy.
Absolutely. Okay. And one thing that I would advise people visiting New York to stay away from, comedy-wise, is any comedy club that has a guy out in the middle of Times Square promising you that Louis C.K. is going to be there, maybe he's not the best example right now. Promising you that Chris Rock is going to be there. These guys are just, like, they have no idea who's on the lineup.
Okay.
Like, it's going to be, you're going to get there, and it's going to be a bunch of, you know, early 20-something comedians who got a spot because they brought 5 people. It's going to be a bunch of schmucks like me, basically. And if you've spent $25 per ticket because someone told you that Bob Saget was headlining, and you get me instead, I won't be offended if you are upset by your purchase. I would be
Bob
too.
will be here any minute.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm opening for Bob.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I hope he shows up soon.
Yeah, he's caught in traffic. Yeah.
So, yeah, there are all these barkers out in the middle of Times Square.
So
who,
beware.
Yeah.
Buyer beware.
Usually they just have like a generic or like white piece of printer paper that says Comedy Central Showcase. And I'm like, I think that Comedy Central would have sprung for some branded materials here. This doesn't seem legit.
Good to know.
So stay away from them and the palm readers, and you're fine. You're fine.
All right, before we get on to Roanoke comedy, fill in the sentence. The mark of a good improv act is?
Good acting. I tell people all the time, I'm like, when I see bad acting, what's usually missing is good improv. And when I see bad improv, what's usually missing is good acting, right? So, like, having the witty, funny things to say is great. Being quick is great. But you have to translate that. Like, if you're doing a scene, even if it's a ridiculous, preposterous, just crazy town improv scene, you've got to stay committed. Like, the things that you're saying are happening in this world you're creating are actually happening, right? How would you actually react if you were the advisor to the president and the president was a Labrador retriever? Like, you know, that's a totally reasonable improv scene you might see if you're just watching someone perform improvised comedy. But you've got to stay committed. Like, anytime you're like detaching yourself from the scene and sort of smirking at it like, oh yeah, we're being very clever up here, you're losing all but the least sophisticated members of your audience.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
So I think good improv, good comedy in general is all about that emotional commitment.
There you
Good
go.
acting.
All right. Well, I know that you're involved here in Roanoke with the Comedy Lab over at Shishka?
Shishka, yeah.
Now,
down there.
is that on Tuesdays?
That's every other Tuesday.
Every other Tuesday. Now,
So
tell us about that. What is that?
That is... So when I moved back here, I realized that Roanoke had comedy shows, right? Like the Berglund Center gets the Jeff Dunhams and the Brian Regans and the Jim Gaffigans of the world. There are improv shows that happen. Shout out to the Big Lick Conspiracy. They've been doing their short form improv show for, I think, 12 years at this point.
Mill Mountain?
Is how long they've been around. You've got Mill Mountain Theater does a nice selection of comedies, usually at least 1 or 2 good ones per season. So there were comedy shows. There were opportunities to go see live theater and get laughs, right? But I didn't necessarily get the sense that there was a comedy scene, right? Like there wasn't a definite circle of people who were bonding around this idea that Roanoke can be a comedy destination.
Right.
There are a lot of comedians on tour right now who are looking at cities smaller, in my opinion, less historically or culturally significant than a place like Roanoke to do a show, but they're not looking at Roanoke, and I wondered why that was, you know. Kid Carter is a local guy who brings in a lot of really great talent. He does the Star City Comedy Club. I hope he doesn't mind the shout out. I don't know the guy personally, but I respect what he does in terms of booking headliners, putting up shows at places like Corned Beef and Company, Awful Arthur's, Martin's, I think, does some of his shows.
Okay.
But, you know, they typically aren't populated by local talent.
Right.
They're people he gets who tour all over. And so, you know, the Comedy Lab, my hope was, when I started it maybe a year and a half ago, was that it would become a flashpoint for that sort of community to grow out, right? And I think that that's actually started to happen. Okay. For instance, there's a group of comedians that get together before the Comedy Lab and workshop each other's jokes. Recently, Christina Montori, who's been doing the shows a lot and has become a very involved member of the local comedy scene, set up a writer's workshop specifically for women, right, who want to do stand-up comedy. Sort of get all the dudes out of the room, because the comedy is still sort of it can still kind of feel like a good old boys club. So sort of making it more inclusive feeling, and more, I don't know, I guess relatable to the specific perspectives that women have in comedy that men just can't understand. So things like that didn't exist a year and a half ago.
Okay.
We did a show recently over here. Christina produced. I helped with some booking. I performed on the show. We set up a show over here at 213 Lux Lounge. It's the old Arzu building.
Arzu, remember that?
Yeah,
G?
here on Williamson Road.
Has that opened up as something else, you said?
Yeah. It's called Lux Lounge. It's a big sort of open dance music venue. They get DJs in there a lot. We did a comedy show in there, the first comedy night they'd ever done in that space, and I think any Roanoke local can appreciate the fact that on a Sunday night, we drew, I think, 160, 170 people to see that show over there. Packed out the room. It was this on a Sunday night. Ooh. Selling tickets, drawing that many people to live comedy downtown.
Was that the comedy club revival or something?
Yes, yeah. So we called it the Downtown Comedy Revival because somebody told us that building was the site of the original Roanoke Comedy Club, and I've gotten a sort of like oral history of that from people like Steve Curtis and Rob Ruthenberg and Melissa Dowdy in the area, who actually have been doing comedy locally for a very long time. Like there are people who have sort of kept it up, but they've had to find other markets to perform in, despite the fact that they're local and hilarious. And that seemed a little strange to me. So,
and then to wrap up on the lab, Johnny. So if a person locally said, well, you know what, I got 10 minutes of good material, I can go over there and test it out. Is that how it works?
Pretty much. Like every comedy show has a set lineup. So I always go into a show knowing maybe 6 to 8 people who are going to perform.
Right.
And that's a built-in sort of core group of comedians that have developed over the lifespan of the show.
Okay.
So there are always people who I know are going to perform. Anyone who wants to just show up to a comedy lab can always put their name on the list. Typically your first time on the mic, I ask you keep it to maybe 5 minutes, because I didn't used to put a time limit on it at all, and that worked for a while. But then we had a guy, and he came in and he did some Christian freestyle rap for about 25 minutes. And everyone was looking at me the entire time like, you gonna stop this? And I was just like,
good.
No, I can't. Again, I want us all to experience this together. So, I've started telling people, maybe your first time, keep it at 5. If I see 5 good minutes, come back and do 15. I don't care. If the audience is into it, if the material is good, no one's going to cut you off, really.
All right. And so people show up just to see who's going to get up there and to listen to the other.
Yeah, and we've been having a lot of shows lately where there were 4 or 5 new people who I've never seen doing 5 minutes each on the mic. Sometimes you'll see them again, sometimes you won't.
But you got to like that.
Yeah.
It's pulling that out of people.
It is. And you might. One thing about the open mic is, and I don't want anyone to feel nervous about coming, but it's really hard at most open mics to feel like the worst person. There are legitimately nights where I will be so bad that people in the room will be like, I could do this. It happens. It's the comedy lab, Every week I try to do new stuff.
Okay.
And some weeks none of the new stuff was as funny as I thought it was at the time. But that's all part of the process.
That's life. Well, hey, let's talk about, as we wrap up here, I want to get your opinion on some films and TV shows, maybe some solo artists that you think are funny or maybe underrated or overlooked.
So I really like, in terms of comedy series, I think one of the greatest triumphs of comedy TV, and as far as every episode being perfectly paced and plotted and not a single wasted piece of action, is Arrested Development.
Ooh.
Like that to me, and like that's got a bit of a cult following now. It's almost stereotypical to hear a millennial male comedian gush about how brilliant Arrested Development is, but it really does. Like it takes that sort of Seinfeld structure where there are basically like 3 beats in every episode, 3 little storylines,
Yeah.
and by the time you get to the end, they've all sort of tied up together. Arrested Development does that beautifully, but with even more absurd subject matter. If you can imagine more absurd than like the Soup Nazi or Bubble Boy. But, Arrested Development is just this brilliant, like... And at the time, no one watched it. But now, because of things like digital streaming, it's not only available, but people are starting to realize, like, whoa, this is a treasure.
I looked up a list the other night of 25 top funny TV shows. Arrested Development was number 1.
Really?
I've never seen an episode.
Really?
Yeah.
Me
What,
neither.
yeah. What about you, G? Any favorite comedy
It's
movies or
probably
TV shows?
with someone like Jamie, sounds like it's probably single A baseball. And I love The Office.
Yeah. Well, along those lines, the first season of 30 Rock, I really like how witty and sharp and quick that was. Have you ever seen 30 Rock?
Yeah. 30
Tina Fey?
Not me.
Yeah.
Tina Fey is she's one of those great, like, she's a great comedy writer and thinker, and I never got to meet her in person, but we were in the same room one time, and I got a little, I don't really get fanboyish. Like, I've met presidents, governors, I've met acclaimed actors and comedians. Tina Fey is one of only maybe 2 or 3 times I ever felt starstruck.
Wow.
She's brilliant, and she went to UVA, so
She did.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. I was listening to her book, Bossy Pants, the other
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
Just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
She's just got it. Well, one last movie I like. I want to see if any of you have seen it. Raising Arizona by the Coen Brothers.
Oh man, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Don't touch my baby, you warthog from hell. What's that line?
Said, son, you're wearing a pantyhose. Yeah, there's just so many good lines in there.
And I don't know, Nicolas Cage. There's a guy
Have you met him?
He's built an entire career essentially on just this weird charisma. Because it's not like on paper he's the greatest actor that ever walked the earth. But there's just something about him. There's this, like, you can't take your eyes off the guy. Whether it's in that or like National Treasure.
Right.
Like he was in Face Off, right?
He was in The Rock, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting to try to grapple with why I love Nicolas Cage as much as I do. But it's been a lifelong affair.
Well, maybe one day he'll take a vacation in Bath County and you can show him around.
Tell you what. Apparently there's a craft brewery there now, so we're moving up in the world. We're moving up.
It's not too late.
It's not too late.
Well, that pretty much wraps us up. G, what have you learned today here with Johnny Camacho?
No, that his name is Johnny and not Jamie. That's what I've learned.
Well, I heard
I'll
you
answer
say
that.
Jamie. I said,
I'll answer to any of it. It's fine. It's fine. It's still a J name.
It's kind of neat to talk to you, to meet you. Little do we know what Roanoke has. So lucky to have you.
And we appreciate what you're doing to bring comedy up.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. This was a lot of fun.
All right, man. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, of course.
Jamie.
We just interviewed Jamie.
Oh, that's how.
Oh, yonder stands little Maggie with a dram glass in her hand. She's drinking away her troubles and a courting another man. Pretty flower made for blooming, pretty stars were made to shine, pretty women were made for love, said no